this talk tonight, I'm planning to talk about some of the understanding and knowledge that I've gleaned from 15 years of practicing permaculture. I plan to talk about some of the projects I've worked on here and there, but it's not my portfolio. That's online if you want to see it. I hope to inspire you about what is possible, even joyful about the future. I hope to activate you to show up in your community in ways that empower others, and to find your true eco niche. I hope to share some projects that I dream of implementing in the future as well. And if there's any alignment or resonance with what you're doing, yay for that. Let's talk more after. I also hope to have a conversation, if you're willing, and not just talk at you. This is a launch party, kind of. It's not a book, but it's me as a writer. Yeah, so thank you for coming and for your donation to my cause. It is no small thing, and I'm deeply moved and honored that you are here. So many of you in this room know me from Occupy Wall Street. Many meaning Brian and his multitudes. The main version of Occupy Wall Street was Occupy Maine. And then as part of the environmental working group, I made some friends and they started 350 Maine chapter. Some of you know me from my former life as a sociology and psychology teacher at Andover College, which got changed into a name we shall not name. And still others from the Women's School for Spiritual Warriors. And some from this talk alone. And some from the Great Village Farmers Market, which is really cool. I didn't expect that one. So I would not be doing this if it wasn't all for you. So thank you. So let's do a little bit of introductions and then we'll hear a word from our sponsor. Okay, so Jenna, I'm going to ask you to start because you're in that seat on my left. Just tell us your name and how you found out about this and what you came for.
My name's Jenna. I know Rachel Lynn from our school that we did together, and I found out about this last week when she was teaching me how to make elixirs here. And I love hearing Rachel Lynn talk and hearing all the knowledge that she has. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I also met Rachel Lynn at Women's School for Spiritual Warriors. And I found out about this talk through my cousin and roommate, Jenna. And throughout our school, anytime I had the pleasure of speaking with Rachel Lynn, I just wanted to hear more. Anytime you open your mouth, I'm like, what more do you have to teach me? There's so much you have to teach, so I'm happy to listen.
Thank you.
I'm Sakura. I met Rachel Lynn from school as well. I'm here to learn more about permaculture.
Sweet.
Yeah, because it's still very new to me. Thank you.
I love that.
My name is Susie. I know Rachel Lynn from our school that just finished. I heard hints of this talk dropped over the last few weeks, but wasn't aware actually until about 30 minutes ago that it was right now.
You made it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I live nearby and I wouldn't miss it because in the short time that I've known Rachel Lynn, I just love how her brain works and like all the connections that she's able to make. And I also am very new to permaculture.
Hi, I'm Marguerite, and I just finished school with these young ladies, and that's how I know Rachel. We were tent mates for a couple times. I just admire what you do and your knowledge and how you express yourself, and you're just a real gift. I'm so glad to be here to support you and learn about permaculture.
Great, thanks. My sisterhood. That's the whole sisterhood. Okay.
My name's Brian. I met Rachel during the Occupy movement. During that time, we saw the media sort of trash the movement and break it down, and during that time, I was like, this is a revolutionary moment, and it's wonderful people, and no one's getting it on camera. So I changed my careers and went into media from behavioral health into getting media, and I've been doing it ever since. And at the end of the Occupy movement, it was very frustrating for us because of how difficult it was to keep things moving in a positive, forward manner. Rachel one night was driving me home, and she said, "I think I'm going to occupy my garden," as a way of saying that this is just, it was out of hand. It was so hard to do what we were doing, and she did, and she's continued on, and to a point that it's just beyond my imagination. We both have been able to go in the directions that we wanted to, and it's just inspiring. And I'm here to learn about permaculture because I think it's a positive way to, oh man, I could talk for a half an hour. So yeah, I need something that has positive results that are tangible, not to worry about things I can't do overseas, or I can't help. And Rachel called me a couple of weeks ago out of the blue and really saved my life because I was just in a spiral. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Grant, and I met Rachel briefly at the Gray Village Farmers Market. My wife, Chloe, and I, we own a small-scale organic farm in Auburn that we just opened up 2 years ago. And as a beginning farmer, I got to pull some shifts at Bow Street Market. So yesterday, I saw your posting at Bow Street, and I was like, Chloe, let's go to this. And she was like, wow, look who's hosting this. And I was
She's like,
like,
are you interested? I was like, I am very interested.
And I have ambitions to start a permaculture orchard.
Great.
Wow.
And I have some knowledge of that. I've worked in some orchards, and I really want to get more knowledge about growing a permaculture orchard.
Glad we're friends.
I'm Chloe. I'm here because I really appreciate Rachel Lynn. Your presence at the Gray Village Market is really wonderful, and every time that I get to share space with you, you bring up the mood so much, and you just are so lovely.
Great.
And I care deeply about permaculture. I think it's one way that we can save the world, and we can do so in our own small environments wherever we are. So I'm just here to learn.
I'm so glad you're here. So good. Eric, do you want to say something?
Hi, I'm Eric. I just found out about this a day or two ago from Brian. Brian and I have been making movies together forever. And yeah, we've been to Vietnam a couple of times during which time we got married. Yeah, so I'm alone in part to just help out if there's anything I can do to help Brian with his recording here. I got a degree in ag, and I read a good bunch of different books on permaculture, and it's definitely the way to go if we could convince our Midwest to turn into permaculture.
Oh, wow.
It would be great.
Yeah.
Whether we will or not is a big question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Leonard?
Hey, hi, I'm Lenore, and I have known Rachel for a while. And I'm here just to bathe in the love that you're all giving out. So it's so nice to hear everyone speaking about you in this way, Rachel. It means it's something many of us have known about you. But I met Rachel through teaching, and in her time as a manager of a B&B, and we spent lots of time making, collecting, cooking, growing, and I also took a permaculture class with you because it was new to me, but in fact it wasn't, because my Italian father I used to garden and do work with him, and he was doing that without me knowing there was a name for it. So anyway, I'm just here for the ride, I guess.
Thank you for being here and bringing back all those memories and the ancestors that you bring into all those things we did together.
Oh, the patio, yeah.
All the things.
Yeah, did that count as permaculture?
Yeah, it's all, well, we're gonna all define permaculture a little bit, I think, today, yeah. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Richard. I heard about this 3 days ago. So I work at the intersection of leadership development, social change, systems change, and regeneration. And regeneration has, the regenerative movement in general has deep roots in permaculture. And it's the bit I know I'm most recent to, I guess. So that's part of it. I'm also part of a growing group that's building a new kind of Maine-based network called Regenerative Maine, which is looking to connect people who are directionally aligned and build intersectional communities of practice and do a bunch of cool stuff. But you were like the first person I've met in a long time who's like leadership, social change, permaculture, regeneration.
You're the first person I've ever met that's like me.
I'm
I'm very excited.
So I emailed Rachel, I was like, you sound awesome. How do I sign up for this thing? And she wrote back, and this was the killer, I think it's on your email signature.
Yeah.
You have a quote.
Yeah.
And I literally just put the exact same quote on the front page of a presentation I just finished. And I was just like,
Wow.
Synchronicity.
Wow.
Woo! I got goosebumps.
What's
Yeah.
the quote, Rachel?
The times are urgent. We must slow down.
I-
Take it away.
Yeah, I did.
I was so impressed with that quote that I looked up the
He
author
wrote
and
that,
the website and just all. I started and read the whole day. I was unbelievable. It's wonderful.
Who's the guy?
Deo?
I can't pronounce. I don't know.
Deo?
Deo.
Akomalafe.
Akomalafe.
I just said to Grant, like,
He's got a
day
lot of
ago-
YouTube.
Just a day ago, I said to Grant, the easiest way to calm down your nervous system is to intentionally slow down, regardless of whatever you're doing, task, duty, work,
Oh,
Like-
that's great.
everything, no matter what it is. Intentionally take a deep breath and move slower. Just move slower. See what happens. We're not robots. We're not machines.
Amen, sister. All right, what an incredible field is already here. Just knowing all these connections and where your hearts are singing and aligning and the notes that you've hit and the words that you brought. Oh, thank you so much. So now for a word from our sponsor. 207 Permaculture is our sponsor. 207 Permaculture is a permaculture and education consulting company that I founded in 2021 or 2020, I can't remember. We do work that is non-transactional, it's relational, it's research-based or social action. Permaculture design and development is part of that. Resilience planning is part of that. Holistic life coaching is now part of that. Last year we did a youth climate action internship, and I ran high school community resilience advisory club at the Green New Gloucester High School. And I guest taught in the economics class about social vulnerability and how we change the world through love for community. That was amazing, and my intent was to bring their findings from the game that held the complexity of all the problems. You literally roll the dice in this game for the climate impact that's going to hit your community, and then you imagine how that is going to play out. And we talk about all the things. How people are not going to get their needs met, how people might get their needs met, how things might change for certain people. Like literally we name somebody real. Anyway, they came up with a few priorities that I was intent to bring to my elders in the community who were my clients in resilience planning. And as much as they talked about having an intergenerational interest in resilience planning, they just weren't receptive to it, which was interesting to watch. And then again, the kids made a difference in the world just by talking about it. They just did. They didn't need the adults in their town to do something. They're already on the path. They are already the difference that we need. So, yeah, so that game is interesting. Yeah, I'm not gonna go into all my work because it's all out there. Yeah, so a little bit about me, which I think you all said a lot about me. So I have a master's in applied behavioral science from Washington State. My thesis is in regenerative leadership, core values work in a cooperative daycare. I also have a bachelor's from USM in sociology. Before 207 Permaculture, I was a program director for a group called the Resilience Hub, focused on social permaculture education, facilitation, and design. I was instrumental in the formation of the Portland Tool Library. I held several large events, Transition New England, the Northeast Permaculture Convergence, and an educators conference hosted by Wolf Snack. I gave several talks and trainings drawing people from the Northeast on ecologies of enterprise and cooperative design labs and other things. So I'm an activist. That is my calling in life. I'm learning to do it kinder. Yeah, I was going to mention, I also started a farmer's market during the pandemic, so thank you for being here to represent. I also took a deep dive into soil ecology during the pandemic, and I studied with Elaine Ingham, who's famous for turning the light down on a microscope and finding a universe and changing the entire soil conversation at the top level of society. She has really just changed it, and I got my license to study soil on that level. Got my microscope, and yeah, I taught 8 weeks of soil ecology to a high school ecology class during the pandemic where the teacher was zonked. So I joined their Zooms and I staged composting projects for them in the morning, and then I'd get online later and and I'd do all the lesson plans that he was like, "You're saving my life right now." And I'm like, "We're saving everyone's life right now." Yeah, so the kids outside doing compost became the talk of the school district. The most hopeful thing that had happened during the pandemic was that they saw kids outside using the greenhouse program. And it was nice to be so instrumental in that and also not be the headline. It was just where I love it to be, you know. Lenore mentioned the B&B. It was built in 1830. I developed a business as an agritourism destination. I offered the first Airbnb experience in the state of Maine, called the Permaculture Experience. I won the Eco Excellence Award from Eco Maine and a Volunteer of the Year of the Town of Gray. I started a blueberry festival in the town of Gray that had its 8th year to this last weekend. I served for 3 years on the planning board, chaired the Recycling and Resilience Committee, joined the Economic and Community Development Committee, where I was able to apply permaculture to an abandoned lot that is now hosting the Gray Village Farmers Market and producing beautifully. I also initiated a meaningful project called the Gray Birdhouse Project, celebrating our interconnection in community during the pandemic. That stands at the farmers market as well. I mean, at the park as well. So enough about me. My God, it's crazy. But it is nice to talk about myself nicely. But, you know,
Yeah.
shortcomings. So, acknowledgement and appreciation for Windpointe Barn. This space is so beautiful. To give you a little housekeeping, there is a restroom here, the composting toilet. So I'll give you instruction, but there's a container of sawdust. You just put 2 scoops on whatever your deposit is, and the cover of the sawdust is handy because then you don't have to make a mess on the floor with your scooping. I told a couple of you, but Windpointe, I am host sitting for the owners of Windpointe, and they were my clients in permaculture design 4 years ago. And while I was getting the whereabouts of what needed to happen while they were gone, a little birdie reminded me that this barn was here and told me after meeting with Jenna that I should give a talk and just see who comes. And I only have 7 days. And then you said, I saw your thing 30 seconds after I sent it. And I went, okay, if he alone comes, this is all. That would fit y'all. I also want to do a stop right here and just like bring it down and say like, let's do a land prayer together. Here we are, Abenaki territory, where the Abenaki people thrived for 10,000 years. Pretty much since the ice receded, their populations began to grow. We thank them for this land and recognize and acknowledge that they are part of this land, that they emerge from this land. This is unceded territory. So much gratitude for the wisdom that lives on through the Abenaki people to this day, and how informative it is, how much wisdom is there embodied. And I'm so grateful for their voices today and being able to hear them. And also to not hear them. I love the part of it's in the mystery, and I have to like listen so deeply that it's not even with my head. Please gather around us for this conversation tonight. Thank you. Thank you for holding us and allowing us to be here. Thank you for guiding us as we move through this place together. Thank you. Okay. So I gotta do a little turnabout. Anyone else who wants to wiggle, you're welcome to. Okay, I need my glasses back. Okay, so opening, discovering permaculture imagination. My write-up. I've never written anything so incredibly persuasive in my life as the invitation to this talk. I really liked how it came out, but now I have to live up to it. So I said that there would be a power of the permaculture imagination to meet the moment. The power to tap into collective genius, to be creative forces in the world, and to shape the future. Is that a tall order?
A little.
You want to say more?
I'm excited by that rather than feeling diminished. So while it is a tall order, it is a worthy order. And there's a Hebrew, it's not a proverb because that's not really how we call those things, but the work is not necessarily yours, but it's also not yours to give up.
Thank you for that. That's good. What do you guys think? Tall order or just, we'll get it done?
One seed at a time.
Yeah. Not the direction the media takes the rest of us Americans. So
That's true.
It is swimming against the grain a bit. But I think it's turning though, with generations younger than mine, and hopefully mine was the last generation that is still, going down the old road. But anyway.
Yeah. I love that you said that. Timelines become very interesting when you have a permaculture imagination. Okay, so let's unpack meeting the moment for a second. What types of words would you use? How would you color the moment? And we can just like round robin or popcorn. I don't care. How would you describe the moment that we are meeting? Inspired. Love that.
Green.
I was going to say green as well.
Say it again.
Green.
Green moment.
Green.
I think it's red. It's red and urgent.
And urgent.
The first one that we missed.
You gonna mute that thing?
I did.
Yeah, you have any words, Richard, for the moment that we're living?
It's a big, beautiful, huge, urgent mess.
Urgent mess. I have that on my list. Okay, let me add to the list a little bit. Some of the voices that I listen to as I pursue my sobriety of the moment are describing the present time as a polycrisis. A time when there is great unraveling, a time of entrenched market mentality and blindness to what is real value, a need for innovation and social change, a moment of fragmentation, a time that is speeding up exponentially, and all the algorithms are aligned with the assumption that faster is better. And it's driving us crazy. A sense that time is running out. There is also in this moment a great deal of abundance. I'm glad you said green. It really is.
I felt the same green.
There's so much gifts. The gifts are being showered on us constantly. The gifts of earth are all around. Emergence is at play right now. There are things unfolding from the mystery that people have willed into existence that we cannot name or know, that to Brian's point are not in the news. I love to go for a walk and post a picture of melting ice on a stream and post it to social media as breaking news. Mm-hmm. It is my favorite ironic thing to put on social media. Mushroom bloom, breaking news. Love that you saw a mushroom when we got here. Drew my attention to it. I appreciate that so much. I did harvest a ton of black trumpets for y'all. And I didn't take them all, so. Then there's Ram Dass. My sisters and I studied recently. There's only right now. Everything else is not real. Like we are literally using if our imagination was a battery, we're losing voltage on everything that isn't now. Wow. Old paradigms are losing control now. And as Jean Houston says, one of my favorite teachers, it's going out like a fine sunset in a blaze of orange. So that's the reframe. Joanna Macy says about us all, you were born from the web of life for this time. From Caroline Miss, the choices that you are making now matter. Want to make a difference? You already are the difference. So this moment is your moment, and it is mine. And there is only this moment, Brian, you missed that part. There is no other, there's no past or future, there's only now. So, I'm here to light people up. That's my purpose. I'm here to participate fully in the web of life and to occupy my eco niche. That has evolved so much since the garden, Brian. So my art is to help people, help groups of people to do this too. To manifest intentionally what they want to live into in this life. That's essentially an imaginary proposition. What you want to live into doesn't exist yet. You have to imagine and will that shit. You have to bring that shit to bear on the earth. Using the earth, being the earth. So, part of my purpose is to facilitate alignment attunement, competence, and hold space for spirit at the center of all of that. So I'm a change agent, and community, creativity, and change are my style of leadership. And I've been meditating on that for 20 years and asking for guidance on that for 20 years. And it has been extraordinary, the things that I've done. None of it I can call a career, which is totally ironic, but it's true. So for some context on this topic of permaculture imagination, this isn't a permaculture class, but permaculture was my pivot from protest. Permaculture was my positive action I needed to make in the world. I realized I was fighting systems, I was bringing all my energy and basically complaining out loud in public and leaking my energy all over the place, and I really just needed to cultivate something. Cultivate leadership. There were a lot of creative protests though, weren't there, Brian?
Yes.
Oh my God, we had so many fun ones. And I loved the community, and the people that I met, I would have never met if I hadn't walked into that Monument Square for day one of the Occupy movement in Portland, which was in October instead of September, because it was a month later. Right? Yeah. Timelines get fuzzy when you're living like straight up and down. So I was called to social change for a very long time, but this pivot was about building new systems. I took a permaculture class and I stayed in it. I don't own land, and that was an interesting edge for a long time. But the universe shined brightly on my decision until it didn't. And the reasons it didn't is that I took things really personally in life. I had a lot of self-deception, believing that something was wrong with me because somebody treated me badly. Self-respect. I was dwelling in the past so much, I never allowed myself to live in the moment. And that was hard. That was hard on my friends. So self-sabotage, the inner starving artist, and even my inner prostitute. They're all on the way until they're not, until you confront these things and put them in the right place. And so I say this to you. Why am I talking about that to you? This isn't a talk about spiritual archetypes, but there is great stuff on that online. Carolyn Miss, Michael Mead, amazing stuff online. Why I'm talking about this personal pitfall stuff is because I'm integrating my own wholeness in real time. There's a concept in permaculture called zones of use. This is one of the concepts of permaculture that I can explain in this particular talk. But it's all about how energy moves through a system and the economy of attending to that. So the economy of participating in that. And so in a very practical sense, it's concentric rings around your house. So your dwelling is zone 1, your dooryard zone 2, zone 3 is that next level. And in permaculture, you would probably put your orchard in zone 3 or 4, just saying. And then zone 5 is wild space, which is a problematic statement to make, and based upon an agrarian construct of life where it's very controlled and the wild is a threat. Whereas an indigenous perspective, there is no perspective of wild. There is just living. But I taught social permaculture. So I brought the leadership development mindset into permaculture and taught social permaculture, and the relationships, zones of use, comes down to you are your first relationship. Zone 0, 0 is you. Zone 0 is your family, new friends, closest friends, besties, tight. Zone 1, your BFFs, extended family. Zone 3, your tribe, your peeps. That's the garden of life. You're just experiencing all the things and doing all the trades and, making all the art, you're just doing that in zone 3, and then you might work there. That might be your work. It might not be work. It might be volunteering. It might be some other creative thing. Maybe a sisterhood. Maybe a social change group. And then there's the world, the rest of the world, and the global scale. It's like your bioregion and the planetary everybody. So, and then there's like, you know, I don't want to say the body count because that sounds like we're dead. But the literal population of people, but then there's also that humanity, just the humanity of it all. That's the part where we use our imaginations, is understanding the humanity of it. Otherwise, it's just statistics, right? And then the media doesn't give all the statistics, just the cherry-picked ones. Okay, so you understand? Any questions about zones of use? I didn't bring any visuals to explain that to you. But zone 00 is your leverage point. The most change that you can make in any system that you're part of is your leadership, your condition. Are you creating the conditions for life to thrive for yourself and others? Are you doing that and then empowering others? That is the basic first level social permaculture. But what's in the way is that we're a big bag of stories, and stories matter. Our language ecology literally creates reality. But we have verbiage, we just spew it. I mean, look at social media. It's just a bunch of disembodied words, most of it complaining and disorienting people, you know, unconscious. And I'm not saying that to complain about them. I'm just saying, like, wow, you can really see it. I did an intervention on myself a couple weeks ago, and I decided I would not comment on anything on social media, but I still used it as much as I usually would. And I was fascinated just to observe what it was that makes me want to speak. Why am I posting? Why am I commenting? And sometimes somebody would literally had inspired me to think of something. And so then I would just write a post on my own and not comment on them, so I wouldn't get in that. Anyway, our words, our creativity is our birthright. And we have such power in our words. I'm remembering, because my sisters are here, a big part of our practice together was noble silence. We would just be together silently, doing what we do silently, and it just helped create a fold in my brain, a choice point to know when to speak. Okay, so your place of greatest influence in all systems is yourself. We can redesign civilization. Once all the permaculture designers find self-awareness, honesty, inquiry. Self-inquiry is hard to see sometimes. How we're showing up sometimes is only visible in the reflection of others. And that can be kind of violent sometimes. It can be confronting and jarring. But we can do the shadow work and let go in gratitude. We can do that. Because even the shit is a gift. And every farmer knows that it's true. So more basically, we have to be honest about what our needs are for real and what our impacts are. Once we get our stuff in line, then we can start influencing the world. We can't decide. But this is interesting because we lie to ourselves. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But really, the most important thing that we do, like all the words I just said aside, we have to bring our gifts. We have to show up and bring our gifts. Thank you for giving me a chance to do that right now. So I will now be getting into the ethics of permaculture, which is the moral foundation, the principles, which is the patterns in nature, or the design process. But I will talk about the imagination thing some more. Permaculture for me, because of the imagination, is about culture work. And culture is a process of adaptation. and it is social, and it leads to innovation because we are creative. So, most of the permaculture design conversations I've been in my life have been about landscape design. And I wanted to separate from landscape design because I have been cultivating a large amount of my practice in permaculture that is not landscape design. It is said that permaculture is both information and imagination intense. And I can attest to this. There are so many measurements and analytical tools, and you use these to understand the place, the systems going on in the place, and there's so much time and investment in the training to learn these tools and techniques, and you're confronted the whole time with, the imposter thing. It's like constantly there. And you are an imposter because you're not a licensed surveyor, you're not a landscape architect, and yet that's the commodity of your knowledge if you go through the pipeline of permaculture education, which obviously I like to go against the grain a little bit. So you can be a permaculture designer and have a landscape architect degree, that's for sure. I didn't number my pages. So forgive me. But we call permaculture design because you're not a landscape architect. So it's kind of like a legal buffer. But the field of landscape architecture wasn't doing sustainability at all, at all. In fact, most of the landscape designs were like looking at a curve on a property. It literally is a map of the ego of the architect. And it has no bearing upon the living or the future unfolding in that place. So anyway, now they are doing sustainable design. I'm working with a landscape architect right now who specializes in sustainable landscape architecture protocols, and she will certify a site as sustainable. And it's not accessible. The government will do it. It all depends on if some legal body requires it to be sustainable, now you have to prove it. So then there's all these landscape architects that can come in and do this. So I read the book and I'm gonna help her do her thing, but I read all the things that qualify a site as a sustainable landscape design, and I was happy to know that my work had qualified. And I didn't have to sit around and have expensive meetings talking to people about it. So there's a lot of math. It's incredible. There's solar surveys and land surveys and input and output analyses and pattern language. Don't forget that one. That's my favorite, actually. Plant inventories, skill inventories, if you're going to get to people using that land. Topographical data, hydrological data, soil biodiversity data, soil types, which is not about living soil, but about structure of soil. Then there's the policy and the laws that are applied on that land, ordinances and blah-de-blah-de-blah. And then there's ownership too. Imagination is so much more than that. Imagination is the imagination is the wholeness and implicate order of things. It is the mystery. It is loaded with unknown things, and it stirs you. And it gives you a dream in the middle of the night, and it interrupts you during your morning coffee, and it sings to you when you walk the land. The permaculture imagination is so much more than that. It's painfully familiar to dwell in the math. I mean, I was spin out there for months working on a design, but it's that one generative pattern that reveals itself to me that makes all of that toiling matter. Our culture values certainty so much. It's literally addicted to certainty. Most organizations of power value security of definite parameters and action plans. But imagination cannot be planned. Imagination cannot be planned. It is unbounded. The dominant culture is also beating the drum of separation, and it's time to let go of that construct. Pause on that. Pause on that, because we are one unified, living body. So imagination is undervalued. During the pandemic, I attended some pretty cool talks academia was having online, and I muscled my way in there, say I was a teacher, and get in the room, and I'd hear that academia is crushing imagination by requiring the right answers. And I said, hell yes, that is true. And I remember being in high school and being like, all my best friends are smartest fucking people. Oh God, they're so smart. They were all dropouts. They were. When I graduated, they were standing on the sidelines without their caps and gowns, cheering the rest of us on. They weren't going to have it. They were going to have their creativity. Now leaders in our organizations, they need to learn how to find their capacity for collaboration. Is that not a theme in the Harvard Business Review now for a decade? Like, it's really the best-selling books on leadership are all about finding out how to collaborate. Because it baffles, it's like, it's a blind spot. Leaders have to unlearn being right. And their lives depend on it. Like, everything has been built around them. They also need to unlearn their identities based on power and privilege dynamics, based on lies and self-deception. There's a lot to say there. Those are some pretty loaded words, and I would love to talk about them, but that is not just talk. We all need place-based identities now to ground us into belonging. This isn't about owning land. I feel that we are on the verge at this time. But it's also, depending on how you harness your imagination, it's also a precedent. So it's both and right now, at every cell in your being, it is both the precipice with the abyss below, and it is the verge of something new. So ecological design, as it's called now, as people poo-poo the permaculture word.
When did that?
Well, all of my colleagues that left the Resilience Hub started the main ecological design school.
Oh, okay.
So there's still permaculture, but people struggle with the word permaculture because it means permanent culture. It started out as permanent agriculture, but that quickly they became aware that was problematic. And what they're really saying is, can we continue to live on this planet? Like that's what they dubbed the word permaculture on. It's like, yeah, permanently. We want to live on the planet permanently. I don't know. I might want to evolve. I've seen what Pokemon can do. I might want to evolve. So permaculture understands the play of sun and soil and water and topography and animals and land use. And it's all about the flow of energy from the sun to the land and the play of energy with water and wind, carbon and nitrogen cycles. These are the regenerative cycle. At the most basic elemental level, carbon and nitrogen are looping constantly. They're doing it right now in our mitochondria.
Well, I just keep thinking of anatomy as permaculture.
Yeah.
So I'm like, ooh, this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I reveal something to the class about you?
Sure.
So not only is Lenore an anatomy teacher at St. Joseph's College, she has an incredible healer's capacity to map the entire body and its processes. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's so funny you say it that way.
I love it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. So carbon and nitrogen cycles. The other thing that it is the creative spirit itself. And when I got to the permaculture group at the Resilience Hub, there was a repression of spirit there, which I was really puzzled by. And I bumped up against it a couple times, being my edgy self. And I didn't understand why, I said, did you know that, Starhawk, author, California, wrote The Fifth Element, total out witch, environmentalist. She's teaching permaculture on the West Coast. And I says to my mentor in Portland, Maine, did you know Starhawk is teaching permaculture on the West Coast? And she calls it Earth action something. Eat. I can't remember what the T stands for right now because I wasn't expecting the Earth activist training. And I mentioned this to my teacher, and oh, that's a different thing. I was like baffled, like what? How can that be a different thing? For me, it was not a different thing. The elegant design of life on the planet is balancing the water budget. Carbon is not loose in the atmosphere, attracting water molecules and creating, what do they call them now? When the sky opens and it pours a river onto a place. They don't even call it pouring buckets anymore. What do they call it? Does anybody know?
Get the mood.
It's a deluge. They have a new word, but yeah, it's a deluge. So this elegant design is embodied in the forests, marine and terrestrial forests. I recently learned from a PhD marine guy and permaculture designer that he is cultivating seaweed farms in the ocean, and he has evidence that they used to be so prevalent, and that would be even bigger of a carbon sink than even replanting all of our pavement would do. And I think that's fascinating because exponentially the biodiversity that arrives once you plant the seaweed is astounding and economically viable to fishing and communities. So, that's tasty. And I don't understand why everybody's not talking about it, but then again, Brian's here to remind me that the media has an agenda.
Yeah.
So this arrangement of organisms, collections of organisms, whether they're in the soil or in the garden or in the sea or in the forest, they make that whole assemblage of what we call the forest. Here's a big word for you, a hollow buoyant. I love that word, better than I like permaculture as a word. Hollow buoyant. Doesn't it sound uplifting? It's buoyant. It's hollow, it's great. I love that word. So creative problem solving. This is like legitimately a leadership theme. Can you get people to creative problem solve? And it used to just be problem solving, but creative problem solving specifically. The permaculture imagination is the power to bring us into relationships that inspire us and exercise a more fulfilling approach to problem solving. I do propose, this is a fact, it allows us to find the right leverage point for change. Some of my teachers call it, human scale. And I'm like, what's human scale? They're like, hand tools. So now I mow my lawn with a scythe. And I love how people don't know what the fuck I'm talking about when I say I'm scything. Especially my trainer at the gym. Like, I got an hour workout today, I was scything. What? And then there's the scale question. On a map, there's like the little scale thing that says 1 inch is 10 feet or 1 inch is 100 miles or whatever it is. I find from like a behavioral standpoint and a leadership standpoint that if I'm really getting my zone zero house in order and I'm going out into the world, the scale of an intervention that I can make in the world I have a circle of influence. I obviously had enough influence to get all your asses into seats tonight. I can't believe. But we have influence. And that is a set amount of behaviors and skills and access that we have, privilege that we have. But then there's this other much larger circle outside of that is things we're concerned about, that we can't do a damn thing about. It is not worth your energy to try and find leverage outside of your circle. So I just like that permaculture brings this idea of scale to the foreground, and as we imagine the future unfolding, what I can do now gets really personal and practical for me. Like when the Resilience Hub ended and the B&B began, I was like, now I got to adapt what I do to do a business environment. I'm gonna plant a garden here now. And then, everywhere I go, I'm planting a garden. Now I'm just planting gardens everywhere. But the scale of the intervention, it's just a really good thing to think about with the imagination. And what you're capable of alone is big. I told you it's the biggest thing that you can do. But when you're working with others and you all have your shit in order, holy shitballs. It's on. And it's on. We don't even have to be in a room. We don't have to be in relationship. We are in relationship through the sacred, through the mystery. We're always connected. The butterfly comes out, greets me, and when I got to the house the other day, and I just went, and I realized that that thing gave me a breath. That thing was a caterpillar last week, crawled itself up into a cocoon, liquefied itself, and now it's a fucking elegant butterfly. I'm going to talk about that again in a minute. Okay, so permaculture, I think, is a learning platform. When I first started doing permaculture design in schools, all the funding and all the grant writing was focused on IT because it's a learning platform. And I'm like, that's the learning platform. It's right here. It's right outside the door. The learning platform is permaculture. It is the outside. It's intergenerational. It's interdisciplinary. It needs to be interoperational with our decision making. And it can be. I believe it can be. So let's unpack this imagination thing a little bit, because I've been, doing the permaculture thing. But the imagination thing, the reason that I come up with this idea of a permaculture imagination is part because of that quote that it's both permaculture and imagination intense, which it is, but also because I'm a sociologist. And there was a book that I read in my undergrad called The Permaculture Imagination. No, scratch that. The Sociological Imagination. The Sociological Imagination is by this guy named C. Wright Mills. And he's writing probably in the 40s or the 50s, but he's changing the conversation just ever this much. He was saying that the framework for understanding society and self is where history and biography give context to common sense.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. It's a framework for understanding society and self in a way that gives a ton of context, both through historical study and biographical reflection on the person, so that it's informing common sense. So he was looking at all the common sense knowledge about society that people had, those people down the end of that dirt road, they've always been a little off. They've always struggled. Or little Bobby Thornton, probably not Thornton, it's probably a more upper crust name, I don't even know. But, we make, small towns, they make up these stories about reality. And Mills is saying, but wait a minute. You might have one person in 100 that's struggling, but when you have 40 people in 100, you have a social issue. And gosh, if C. Wright Mills is right, we have a lot of issues. We have a lot of social issues. So his work was a breakthrough in that he says that, what I just said, every town might have a few people that are down and out who struggle to make it, but when it's half the town, that elevates to a social issue. Last week, just in time information, I found this guy who's a life coach named Jonathan Gustin. Actually, he's a purpose coach. And he reminded me that what biologists describe that caterpillars do when they transform is called, the biologists call the cell tissue the imaginal cells.
That's cool.
Right? And I remembered that. I remember learning that and being transported by that, like when I was 17 years old or younger. Like I just remember being like blown away. And I even remember bringing that idea to like Sunday school and trying to get other like little people all excited about it. But seriously, this is like the resurrection. Like this is a biblical situation, but it's in the garden. So they turn to liquid and they reemerge as an elegant and graceful pollinator. His whole thing is that imagination is perception. What if we have alternate organs of perception, feeling and sensing, that are not taught by our family or school? What if they're just innate? What if in the sacred dance of survival that humanity is always in, we are guided by this divine order? He talks about also imagination being place-based. That's where I really leaned in. I was like, really? I had to like hit rewind like 20 times because my distraction level, I just had to understand what he meant. So he says that the soul is a place as well as a perception. And that just really piques my interest, because when we do a prayer of acknowledgement of the Abenaki being of place, and we have this really clumsy language called English that we use to communicate, which seems to objectify everything, there is room there, in place. If we drop in to the place that is, the bounding of ourselves, yeah, but also the place that is Windpointe, that is Abenaki territory, that is Freeport, that is, place. I love that. Also, imagination is full of story and imagery and sensation. And some of that's habituated, right? Some of that is habituated. We get into these loops, don't we? My friend Lenore says, that's a story, Rachel. Watch your stories. I love that. So I think that the permaculture imagination is not our mind. It's not, it's not what we think. The permaculture imagination is sort of a soul sight of the land and of the living, but also of the future generations. Can we see them? Can we pray them into existence as thriving? Can we sow seeds in their honor? They don't even exist yet. Can we do that? I feel like we can do that. Your unique and unbounded signature of love is imbued in everything you do and say. That is powerful. Our narratives matter. We're not taught soul sight or the permaculture imagination because it's a powerful choice point, frankly. It's a point of creation where we're either ascending or descending. We're either spiraling up or spiraling down. Like, what are we going to bring to that? In nature, it's, abundance overflowing forever and ever infinitely, or erosion. We're used to leading with problems in society, but it's the wholeness that we need. All the funders of all the projects I've ever seen that were funded expect us to lead with solving a problem. We apply our funds and frame things in short-term solutions. And then we get in the grant cycle for a living. But helping and fixing is a gaze. You know what I mean by gaze? There's a male gaze. It looks upon women in a certain way. There's a savior gaze that looks upon less fortunate people in a certain way. The gaze of helping and fixing leads us to reach for low-hanging fruit. I'm never going to forget the first time since Occupy that I actually, never in my life have I ever seen this, but the government started doing climate action planning. And I was like, okay, I'm going to that, I'm going to listen to that. I zoom in on the computer, I'm sitting in my dining room and listening to these people. I get thrown into a room, a breakout room, and all these career agencies, government, like grant writers and, everybody starts looking for the low-hanging fruit. How fast can I get that funding so that I can justify my job? And I literally had cringing. I was literally cringing. The opposite of how I felt when we were talking about the synchronicity of slowing down. They were racing to the lowest hanging fruit. And it's always going to be the measurable. And the only thing in the climate action conversation at large that is measurable is greenhouse gas emissions. And all of them are organizing around that. And that's sad because there's so many opportunities everywhere. But the imagination is suppressed by the language and the narratives. So I only bring up that example to show how that can happen. Doing goodism is another way. There's right now there's a big movement towards native pollinator gardens. I love them. Like, I'm all in on the native pollinators. I really am. And if you're doing it because you want to, save native pollinators, you also need to look at what you had for breakfast. Because if you're eating of a food that's going to clear the native vegetation out of another place so that you can have your oatmeal, or, your beer, or, whatever you're consuming is doing more or less for pollinators than your, native pollinator garden. So, love what you can do what you can, but put things in perspective. The imagination helps with that. One of the things I love about permaculture is the emphasis on restoration and regeneration. It's love in action. We create the conditions for thriving. That's what it's all about. How can I intervene here so that more thriving can happen and I can get out of the way? I don't need a monument to me on it. There's no temple here. It's just the living, serving the living, connecting up with that. In design, we lead with connection and interrelationship, interrelatedness. So last night I went to sleep and I says, all right, it's full moon. I got some mugwort in my hand, stuck it under my pillow, and I was like, okay, dream keepers, I need to know what I gotta say tomorrow because I haven't written my speech yet. And what I got was I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I heard, what is steampunk, Rachel? So I was like, oh, this is fun. So do y'all know what steampunk is?
No.
So it's a genre of science fiction, but it also translates to other art forms, even in like interior design can be steampunk. But basically, it's a retro-futuristic genre where everything looks like, industrial, but it's like it's a future moment. Like it's all cast in the future. So I realized that all of my permaculture designs, all of them, are sort of like a retro-futuristic science fiction, which I had notes on, but I think they're over there somewhere, based on like a pre-colonial America. Where like the forests are towering, like there's this extinct tree that we don't have in this bioregion anymore, but it literally went from like, it went all the way to the Maritimes, to Nova Scotia, St. John, all the way down to Virginia. And it stood like 250 feet high, like sequoia, like, right? This is the East Coast sequoia. And this was like what got the king excited about the colonies, because they could make 40 masts out of one tree. So quickly these trees were all taken out. And I'm talking, these trees were so big, they would be 8 feet around, And there's a guy, Tom Wessels, who tells this story. He's a forest forensics and historian and economist. He's amazing. And he can talk for a really long time. But he says all of the tallest trees we know today were the understory by a long shot. Right?
Yeah.
I know, imagine.
All the roads, Mass Landing Road, was carved by dragging these things out of here. What? Anyway, I'm on a tangent. So anyway, I think every one of my designs has like this old world coppice yard, coppicing being a way to extend the life of a tree hundreds of years past its life expectancy. While maintaining a relationship with it, you harvest it for its food, you harvest it for its raw material and its wood. And that is what, people used for dowels and baskets and houses and everything. So I'm always imagining the future as a weaving culture. And so I imagine that there will be cooperative agroforestry farms that are not owned land but held in common. And I'm hoping that conservation can get out of its own way and play a part in that, but we'll see. There's a long legacy there. I'm not going to go into it. But you have to know the history and the biography always of a leader. So retro futuristic science fiction, I always see, little eco-villages, little hubs of community that like trade with other community. And I always see ceremony. I always see like people gathering for a reason, having meaningful storytelling, processing the harvest and celebrating life like the indigenous people do. So I feel like, have you ever seen that I know you probably have, Stephen Covey's Urgent and Important Matrix? You've seen that? So the urgent important matrix is this urgent and important, and that thing is like a fire going off like a alarm going off all the time. But it's not where the magic happens. The magic happens where like it's important but not urgent, and then everything else is not important, so they don't matter. But I feel like we're in this moment where we need a new matrix that's like ancient and urgent. So we might not be able to find the leverage, or we might not operate at the right scale to influence change that we want, but we shouldn't lose soul sight, because we can make a difference here and now. And that has to do with our ability to imagine it. So the ancient ones are there with us. They are there. I think it was Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, who I read last week, that made me think of this, because she said of the honorable harvest that it's both urgent and important that we tend to the harvest in a sacred way, that we restore our relationships with nature in that way. So some of the things that I'm excited about are the makerspace I mentioned. There's this floating bog that is a natural occurring thing that you can mimic through design. You can engineer these floating bogs and plant them out like rafts on the lake. And they are literally the only way that I can find to grow the invertebrate population in the lakes. And the invertebrate population is what is the definition of water quality. That's how they measure and define it. And if you can create the conditions for those creatures to thrive, why wouldn't you do that? Like, bam, I'm designing a project in my mind, in my imagination, with this lake district and Unity College and the town of gray, where I have a little social capital at this moment, so that we can float these things and we can get students to study them and teach water quality. But it's honestly, it's gonna have to change how the Department of Inland Wildlife Fisheries and the DEP and the Lakes Association relate to the lake. So I'm just trying to figure out how I can just weasel in there.
I think they're doing that in Vietnam.
The floating islands, I
Yeah.
think they are.
They're
Yeah.
doing it in Oregon. I've got to give you Allison's.
And they're pretty. I mean, it's like, it's a little growing, little floating.
They're pretty.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
They're
And
fantastic.
that was the first time I heard of it.
They're ancient and they're fucking important.
Right.
And the DEP is
Great.
like, well, you're gonna have to take them out of there. You gotta, it's gonna be heavy. You can't have a bunch of senior citizens. Blah, blah, blah. Whew.
Yeah, you can.
So discouraging. But I'm not discouraged. I'm gonna join these people on.
Yeah.
And the other thing is community supported housing. So I found myself in this conversation at the Build Maine conference, because I attend the urban planning conference because I just love how people are trying to make things happen in their communities. And there was a talk being given that I happened to be in the room for, and I didn't expect it, but I got turned on because Maine Housing Authority has been funded by the legislature to recruit basically new developers to build housing in the 6 to 18 unit numbers of houses. And I thought, well, that's a good amount to make an eco-village happen. And that like I said before, I don't own land, but if I was a new developer and I came to own the land, I certainly would have my Compass Agroforestry farm on it and call it a landscape design. Anyway, so I'm on the phone with the University of Orono, who has the only 3D printed home made of recycled wood and resin, which is better than concrete for a lot of reasons. But I think they can have green roofs on them. So I'm gonna keep talking to them and see if I can find a community supported approach. Has to be community supported, just like community supported agriculture, because affordable housing is a dirty word. Population growth is a dirty word. There's a lot of resistance. But in the same breath, you'll hear people saying, my mom really needs to move out of her house into something smaller. It's like, well, you gotta build it, buddy. You can't have it all, but you could. Just saying. Okay. So those are some of the things that I'm most excited about. To wrap up, I want to say that when we practice the permaculture imagination in community, we are co-creating the world anew. We are emerging from the same unifying force of life as all other beings. That energy flows through us all. We can help others belong by making places together where life is balanced and thriving happens. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.